Terrifying secrets of room 403. Exposed haunting terror at the world's most cursed motel. The neon flickered above the rundown motel like a dying heartbeat. John's Motel. It buzzed ominously. Yet, etched on that flickering sign was more. Room 403. Beware. The legends whispered of chilling disappearances and ghostly figures flitting through the rooms. Sarah pulled her old car into the gravel driveway, unease washing over her like cold rain. She couldn't shake the stories, but she had no choice. Her children, Emma and Jake, needed shelter. The diner's lousy paycheck didn't cover repairs. Tonight, their laughter echoed through fear. Inside, clutter and dust swallowed the air. The motel's owner greeted them with a smile too wide, eyes glinting beneath his curly hair. "Welcome. Let me show you to your room," he said. Sarah's heart raced, instincts kicking in. Something felt off, like she wasn't meant to be there. She shook it off, focusing on her children. But as they ascended the creaking staircase, the air grew thick and stifling, a pressure in her chest. Room 403 stood at the end of a long hallway, its door slightly ajar. Inside, the chill wrapped around them. Emma's voice quivered as she gestured toward the cracked mirror. "Mom, I saw a face." The hairs on Sarah's neck stood on end. Her stomach flipped. A fleeting shadow flicked in the corner of her eye, but she refocused, fighting her unease. "It's just a trick of the light," she reassured Emma, forcing a smile. But the first strands of horror were seeping in without her knowing. As night descended, a cacophony of whispers slithered from the walls. A wave of dread crashed over her, gripping her heart with unyielding fingers. The words were just out of reach, but the sensation of being watched tangled deeper within her thoughts. Sarah paled. Was it her imagination, or did she sense eyes boring into her? She clutched her children tighter, desperate to shield them from whatever lay in wait for them. Then, in the dead of night, panic struck hard. She heard something. A bump? A shuffle? Heart pounding. She stepped cautiously towards the thin walls that separated them from the unknown. Her breath came in quick gasps as she ransacked the room for any clue, and that's when she stumbled across the first trace of horror. An old newspaper clipping, yellowed and brittle beneath the mattress. "Disappeared from room 403. It read. No trace found. Terror surged through her veins like ice. The stories she once dismissed came rippling back, missing persons, all connected to this dreaded place. Breath quickening. She felt the walls press in on her as she pieced together the disquieting history. Who was the friendly owner? Had he been behind it all? What was lurking beyond the thin sheets of flimsy plaster that encased them? Before she could recover from the sinking dread, a loud pound exploded against the door. The noise echoed through her bones, reverberating like a war drum. A familiar voice seeped through, sending sharp chills crashing down her spine. "Sarah, are you in there?" It was their neighbor, the one who always hovered too closely in their lives, wanting just a minute of her time. She hesitated. Did she truly know the people around her? Something sinister twisted in her gut as the door rattled once more. Fear clawed at her throat. What was lurking on the other side of that door? Would she let it in? Or could she find a way out before the darkness consumed them all? The door trembled violently under the weight of an unseen force. "Sarah?" The voice called again, more insistent, almost desperate. Her heart thundered like an approaching train, drowning out the cacophony of whispers behind her. "Mom!" Emma whimpered, her tiny body pressed against Sarah's side, eyes wide and glassy. Jake, clutching his stuffed bear, peered around like a cornered animal. "Stay back," Sarah mouthed, her breath barely catching the air. She staggered toward the door, wrestling with the temptation to answer. What if it really was someone who needed help? But something inside her urged caution. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was behind that door was ready to prey on her fear. A thud resonated deeply, shaking the very walls of the room. "Let me in, Sarah." The neighbor's voice twisted, almost unrecognizable now, laced with an urgency that felt wrong. Panic began to weave its way into her bones. Then the sounds changed. Footfalls, light and quick, pattered down the corridor, scraping against the floor like nails on wood. With horror, Sarah turned toward the sound. She felt a rush of air, icy and jagged, as if something passively stirred to life. "Emma! Jake! Into the bathroom! Now!" she urged, shoving them toward the small space hidden behind a torn, grimy curtain. She locked the door, her hands shaking. The whispers rose again, a choral melody of voices, their words dark and inviting. Try as she might to ignore them, she felt her resolve crumbling. The pounding on the door returned, louder, an unholy drumbeat. "Sarah." The neighbor's voice now dripped with malice. "Don't try to hide. I just want to talk." Chilled and trembling, Sarah slid down to the floor next to the bathroom door. "Stay quiet," she whispered, her heart racing dangerously fast. What could she do? For the first time, she wished for a man's strength, her husband's protective embrace to shield her from whatever lurked beyond the threshold. The air grew sharper, more electric, filled with the heavy scent of decay. The screams of the past echoed in her mind, mingling with her own suppressed panic. Suddenly, a crash erupted. The bathroom door rattled violently, seeming to respond to the demand echoing through the motel. Unfathomable terror swept through her. Somehow, she sensed a shadowy presence sweeping through the hallway, a ghostly fog swallowing everything in its path. The whispering escalated into frantic murmurs. "Join us! Join us," they sang, a chorus edged with longing and despair. Something clawed at the corners of her eyes, something dark and endless. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" Emma's shaky voice floated into the damp silence. Sarah's mind raced. She was losing her grip, battling this unseen terror swirling around her. "We have to leave," she said, gripping the handle, heart pounding against her ribs. But the rattle of the doorknob caught her off guard, a soft twist echoing through the room. The very act sent vibrations through her skin, her nerves dancing at the brink of collapse. "Mom?" Jake's voice was a fragile plea enticing her to break. Before she could respond, the door creaked open slowly, deliberately, revealing an empty hallway tainted with shadows dancing in the corners. "You shouldn't have come here." It felt like the walls whispered, each crack sending rivulets of fear into her core. With her heart racing against her ribs, she turned to her children, but blood drained from her face. They weren't there. She stood frozen, terror gripping her throat. Where had they gone? A chill swept through the room, wrapping around her like a shroud. She was alone. A faint giggle echoed from the hallway. Sarah blinked, paralyzed by a wave of unease. It was a child's laugh, innocent yet twisted, trailing down the corridor. "Emma?" She stepped into the dark, drawn toward the sound. What lay ahead felt like an abyss. Would she find her children? Or would she stumble into the grasp of something far worse? The shadows beckoned her forward. The darkness swallowed her whole as Sarah stepped into the hallway, her pulse pounding in her ears. The walls felt alive, alive with the breath of that unsettling presence that had slithered through the cracks. The giggling echoed again, sharper, more demanding. It was a chilling call, the sound dancing through the thick shadows, tugging at her like an ill wind. "Emma?" she whispered, forcing her legs to move. Each step felt like wading through thick mud, resistance pulling her back toward the safety of the room. But she couldn't turn back. Not now. She needed to find her children. They were in danger, and the thought propelled her forward, even as dread knotted her stomach. The laughter grew louder, followed by a series of soft thuds, like tiny feet racing away from her. Fear burned hotter within her. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice seeming to drown in the atmosphere thick with despair. But the sounds only faded, retreating into the deeper shadows with a malevolent glee. She approached the first doorway on her left, the door slightly ajar. A breeze wafted from within, carrying hints of something sharp and sour. It was a room full of secrets, and instinct screamed at her to pass it by. But the laughter rang out again, bouncing off the walls, now closer and more taunting. "Emma!" Panic clawed at her throat. With trembling hands, Sarah pushed the door open further. The room was dim and disheveled, Remnants of a life long gone tumbled across the floor. A stale breeze lifted the dust, swirling it around like a spectral dance. But there was no sign of her children. The laughter stopped. Silence engulfed her, oppressive. A dread silence, as if the room itself held its breath. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw something shift near the window, a flicker of movement. Her heart skipped. "Jake?" she whispered, forcing herself to the window. She peered out into the dark, but only shadows stared back. Feeling corners of her sanity fraying, she turned, only to be met with another opening door at the far end of the hall. The door swung slowly, creaking ominously. A silhouette of a child loomed in the entryway, just beyond the threshold. "Mommy, come play with us," the voice sang sweetly, but something was all wrong. It wasn't just Emma or Jake. It was something else. The shadows coalesced into a cluster of tiny figures, their features obscured but their eyes gleamed with unsettling brightness. "Stay away from them," Sarah screamed, fear erupting in every syllable. The figures giggled, a sickly sweet sound tumbling through the hall as they glided closer. Each low, chilling voice merged, flooding the corridor with a cacophony of whispers. Join us," adrenaline surged through Sarah, snapping her back to reality. She couldn't let them have her children. She rushed toward them, the breath ripping from her throat as the shapes darted away. A flutter of movement spiraled into the next room, disappearing into the shadows. Sarah surged forward, desperation propelling her onward. As she entered, the room felt alive with movement, shadows skirting just out of reach. The air around her thickened, repelling her, as if the very walls were urging her to turn back. Then she saw them. In the far corner, Emma and Jake were huddled closely together, their eyes wide with terror. But instead of relief, a wave of horror coursed through her. The dark figures surrounded them, inviting, beckoning with twisted grins. "It's safe here," they whispered, reaching out with shadowy hands. "Join us and play forever and oh," Sarah cried, pushing through the distorted reality to reach them. But as soon as she grasped their hands, the laughter erupted again. "Now you can choose." A shudder ran through her. The darkness within the room pulsed, hungry for her soul. She could feel it, a choice that could unravel everything. The children's faces gazed out blankly toward her, yet filled with something hollow. It was as if they were both there and not there, caught in a void. "Look at us, Mommy," Emma said, the innocence wrung out of her voice. "Don't you want to stay?" A scream welled up inside Sarah, but the room pressed down on her, filled with shadows that seemed to breathe. She had to fight back. With sheer determination, Sarah ripped her children from the grip of the darkness, knowing this would either release them or seal their fates forever. "In the end, you have to make a choice," a voice whispered from behind her, chilling the very marrow of her bones. What choice? What awaited them in the endless shadows? The presence loomed larger, tightening like a noose around her throat, the whispers spinning into a tornado of noise. Would a choice be enough to save them? The shadows tightened their grip, and Sarah felt herself being pulled toward the very heart of terror. The grip of shadows around Sarah tightened, squeezing her lungs as if the darkness itself wanted to snuff out her breath. She felt her feet dragging against the floor, a desperate attempt to uproot herself from the looming dread. The whispers clawed at her mind, each word threading into her thoughts like sharp knives. "Mommy, don't leave us," Emma's voice broke through the darkness. But it was no longer a sweet call. It had turned into a sinister echo, hollowed by the shadows. Chilled Sarah to the bone. "Hold on," she shouted, trying to project confidence. But the panic in her voice twisted her stomach harder. She forced herself to look into her children's eyes, seeking the warmth of recognition. Yet, the light she knew was fading, replaced by a cold vacancy that mirrored the shadows surrounding them. They didn't look like her children anymore. The dark figures appraised her, their eyes a fiery, unnatural hue, flashing with predatory glee. "Join us," they hummed in a twisted harmony, their chorus reverberating through the air as if the very walls were joining in. "No," she pushed through the oppressive atmosphere, a primal instinct kicking in to protect them. We're leaving. The moment her hands tightened around Emma and Jake's, a surge of energy rippled through her. The darkness recoiled, hissing like an angry snake. The children squealed, a short, cutting sound that made Sarah's heart lurch. It wasn't the scrapes of delight but shrieks of pure fear. Run, she commanded, propelled by the flickering ember of hope that blossomed despite the encroaching shadows. She tore the children away from the figures that were grasping at them, their claws made of shifting darkness. Without a second thought, she charged back into the hall, the sounds of laughter abruptly overshadowed by something more sinister growls, deep and unearthly, as if the very essence of the house was awakening against her. The hallway stretched before her, now a twisted labyrinth pulsing with shadows. Sarah ran, not knowing where she was going, but knowing she had to move faster than the darkness that seemed to stalk her, lurking just out of sight. "Mommy, I'm scared," Jake whimpered, tears streaking down his little face, and as she looked back, she could see the faint, flickering shadows creeping closer, relentless in their pursuit. "Keep going. Don't stop," Sarah urged, willing her trembling legs to carry her and her children faster. The further they ran, the clearer the laughter grew, merging with the growls in a haunting symphony that made every hair on her body stand on end. They haltingly approached another door, its wood warped and splintering. Sarah slammed it open without hesitation, dragging her children into the disarray within. This room bore an unsettling sameness, filled with broken furniture and remnants of past lives. But there was something indescribable lurking just beneath the surface. "Hide!" she hissed urgently as she shoved them toward a shadowy corner and dashed for the door, desperate for a glimpse of whatever might still roam the hallway. The shadows warbled, a cacophony escalating into a frenzy of whispers, warning cries intertwined with demands. "You're not alone. You can stay forever." The voice wrapped around her. Sinking deep, she heard another soft pattering, that dreadful giggling creeping back. But this time, it felt closer. Her heart raced uncontrollably, each thud reverberating like a war drum against the silence around her. A door slammed somewhere down the hall, shaking the walls, and a new depth of terror gripped her throat. "Emma? Jake?" she called out, the names tumbling from her lips like a frantic prayer. The room's shadows twisted, swirling into a tangible entity that hovered in the air before her. It pulsed, drawn to her fear, pulsing like a heartbeat within a nightmare. She could feel it reaching toward her, threading its presence around her limbs. Desperation clawed at her mind as realization dawned. She wasn't just running from the dark she felt, but from the choices she hadn't yet made. With resolve, she wrenched herself from the dark's grasp, ready to face the shadows. "What do you want?" she shouted, voice breaking through the tremors of fear. "Only what you are willing to give." The voices cooed in a harmonious blend, mocking her with sweet promises wrapped in wickedness. Did she have anything left to offer? As she stood, hemmed in by darkness, she knew their fate rested on the precipice of a decision that straddled light and shadow. But with every passing second, the weight of her choice loomed ever heavier. What would she sacrifice to save her children, her sanity, her soul, or something far worse? The darkness awaited her answer. The shadows coiled tighter, their dark whispers filling the room like a noxious fog. Sarah dropped to her knees, heart pounding. "Please, just tell me what you want," she begged, desperation draping her voice like a heavy blanket. A moment of eerie silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating, before the shadows erupted into a cacophonous laughter, shattering her fragile hope. "Your children or your freedom," they sang in cruel harmony, each note cutting through her resolve. Panic surged through her. How could she choose? Emma and Jake were her world. "You can't have them," she shouted, her voice rising against the tide of darkness, fueled by instinct more than courage. She darted to where they had hidden, shrouded behind a dilapidated armchair. Their faces were pale, eyes wide with terror, and Sarah fell into their embrace, wrapping her arms protectively around them. The shadows twisted in a fury, a wild cyclone of wickedness swirling around the room. "Stay with us, Sarah, become one of us." The words slithered near, seductive and sickening, promising a dark peace that held no reality. "No, I will not abandon them." Her voice cracked under the weight of her defiance. The entity recoiled, as if struck. The shadows wailed, a tortured serenade that rattled off the walls, demanding the children. They screamed, their cries echoing endlessly, almost drowning out the chaos. "Mommy!" Emma's voice was a haunting plea, and each cry tore at Sarah's soul, filling her ears with panic. She had to act. The darkness surged forward, stretching slender, shadowy fingers reaching for her children, hungry and relentless. In that instant, a flicker of resolve flashed in her mind. She had to do something to protect them, anything. "Let go of my children," she yelled, and for the first time, she felt the undercurrent of fear twist into something fiercer anger. Without thinking, she thrust her hands out, a subconscious act of defiance, and a tiny sliver of light glimmered in the center of her palm. It pooled like liquid sunshine, warm and almost palpable in the clutches of the overwhelming dark. The shadows hissed, recoiling from the light as they had from her resolve. "Keep it away." One of the figures shrieked, its voice like nails on a chalkboard, breaking through the haunting melody. Sarah didn't hesitate. She thrust her other hand forward and the light burst into a blinding flare, illuminating the room in brilliant white. Shadows shrieked, twisting violently as they were consumed. She felt warmth radiate from the light, flooding her with strength and clarity as it shredded through the darkness. But the shadows fought back, the growls crescendoing into an anguished roar, a desperate plea from something that knew it was losing. Yet, even in this moment of hope, she could not shake the frantic realization that the shadows were shifting, negotiating. The deeper they fell into chaos, the closer they circled. They wanted to take her children, but they also wanted something else, something deeper. Just as the light reached its zenith and seemed to cover everything, she heard a familiar voice, soft and laced with sorrow. "Mommy, we want to be with you," echoed Jake, his tiny voice absorbing the last of the light. "Don't say that," Sarah shouted, but the words fell uselessly to the cold, unyielding floor. That familiar tug of grief threaded through her heart. Would she sacrifice her children's innocence for their lives? Could she protect them from this darkness while chaining herself to its horror? The light began to flicker, the shadows inching back as if tasting victory. Time felt suspended, her breath caught in her throat. And then, she heard it again, a laughter, dark and inviting, rising from the depths of the shadows. "Join us forever, and they can stay safe." Her gaze flickered to her children, their faces a mirror of dread and misunderstanding. What would she decide? Just as the light reached its breaking point, a slam echoed outside the room, an intrusion into the terrible quiet, a grounding in reality. With newfound urgency, Sarah called to her children, "Hold tight." The shadows shivered, vibrating with malignant intent. As the door burst open, a silhouette framed in the light. Was it salvation, or something worse? The figure stepped into the room, and Sarah's heart dropped into her stomach. Would this be her rescue or the final nail in their coffin? The shadows grasped her ankles, pulling her toward the abyss. Time hung stopped, the room trembling as she faced her next horror. The figure stepped into the room, illuminated by the dying light. A man, tall and gaunt, his eyes sunken, glimmering with a mix of desperation and determination. Sarah recognized him. It was Tom, her estranged brother. "Sarah, get away from them," he shouted, the intensity of his voice breaking through the haze of terror. The shadows momentarily halted, drawn in by the unexpected presence, as if sensing a connection they could exploit. "Tom?" she stammered, the tension in her muscles faltering at the sight of him. Hope sparked, bright and wild, but it flickered as quickly as it ignited. "What are you doing here? Don't ask. Just trust me." He rushed into the room, arms outstretched to shield her children, but the shadows lunged back, angry and relentless. They hissed, dark tendrils lunging toward Tom, seeking to consume him. "Stay behind me, Sarah," he yelled, the weight of his voice tangled with urgency. "This is a place of darkness. You have to." "I can't leave them," she cried, her fear surging like a tidal wave, nearly drowning her. The shadows lunged again, grasping at Tom's ankles. He barely dodged them, but they were relentless. They swirled around his legs like a noose. A haunting whisper intertwined with the laughter filled the room, slithering around them. Your brother is a traitor, Sarah. He will fail you to know. I won't let you take them. Sarah yelled vehemently, feeling the flicker of light inside her pulse with renewed vigor at her defiance. She shifted her weight forward, drawing on that strange warmth. The light flared again, throwing the shadows back with renewed strength, illuminating every dark corner of the room. Sarah, focus. Listen. Tom's voice cut through the chaos. There's a way to break their hold, but you have to be willing to fight. You can't fight how? She screamed, feeling the weight of despair creeping back, mixed with the gnawing dread of defeat. Tom met her eyes, desperation etched into his features. You need to let go of your fear. It's feeding them. They thrive on it. You must embrace love, not of them, but for your children. It's the only way. The shadows coiled tightly, their laughter morphing into a menacing growl. Your love cannot save them, Sarah. Only surrender will bring peace. We're not giving in. Tom shouted, his hands struggling against the shadows curling up around him. In that moment, Sarah felt the cold sweat of desperation on her brow. She took a deep breath, focusing on the light within her. It pulsed, thrumming with an energy that felt magnificent but terrifying. Deep down, she sensed it was more than just a battle of light against dark. It was a fight for her resolve, her belief in love against the choking grip of shadows. Hold on, Sarah said, clenching her fists. We'll fight together. Just as she thrust the light forward, pushing it towards Tom, the children's voices broke through the din. Mommy. They cried, a chorus of pleading that echoed. The shadows writhed, sensing the influx of love and defiance, but they lashed out harder, shrieking in pain. You'll regret this, Sarah. You cannot protect them. The room began to tremble, shadows racing toward the edges, searching for a way to reclaim control. But the light glimmered stronger, wrapped around her, fortifying her resolve. Tom continued to struggle, but the shadows tightened their grip on him, dragging him toward the core of darkness. Stay with me, Sarah, he cried out. Tom, her heart split. Should she help him or concentrate on her children? They were slipping away into the shadows as the entity roared in rage. The ground beneath them quaked, the walls bending to the will of the creeping despair. In that shining sliver, a thought pierced through. Only together could they break this curse. But would they all survive? The light flickered again, wavering, reflecting her doubt. Just a moment's hesitation, and all could be lost. The shadows still hissed, hungry for the weaknesses that illuminated the path to despair. Time felt like a tightening noose as Sarah's world spiraled. Their future dangled precariously on her decision. Could she unleash the full power of love amidst this consuming darkness? Then suddenly, the shadows howled louder, lunging for the children. Eyes bright with malevolence, shadows swelling like a storm about to unleash its fury. Would Sarah's moment of choice turn the tide? Or would love and defiance be snuffed out in the all-consuming shadows? A moment hung heavy, everything boiling down to one impossible question. Who would she save? The shadows roared, their fury consuming the room's light, and for a moment, despair threatened to suffocate Sarah. She felt the surge of darkness pressing against her skin, a clammy grip, cold and clamorous. Every instinct screamed to retreat, yet the children's voices broke through the chaos, pulling her back. Mommy, help us! Each cry layered with fear. They were no longer just voices but tendrils of her soul, stitching her together through the chaos. Tom, she shouted, the torment of having to choose rending her heart. She thrust the light forward again, not willing to let it dim. The shadows hesitated, sensing her resolve wavering, and then surged. Sarah, no! Tom yelled as they snaked higher, pulling him closer into the overwhelming dark mass. He gasped as the tendrils wrapped tighter, choking his words. Let go of him, she screamed, channeling every ounce of love she had for her children into the light. Time slowed, like watching an accident unfold in front of her, as she felt the warmth of the glow expand. The shadows hissed, their shrieks echoing in every corner of the room, twisting into a cacophony of deceit. "You cannot save them, Sarah. They belong to us." "No," she shouted back, hands shaking with determination. She focused on Tom, the bond of brother and sister stronger than any darkness. "Hold on, Tom. Just hold on." The light pulsed, flickering violently, and for an instant, it illuminated the room beyond the shadows, a glimpse of a faded family photograph hanging on the wall, their laughter frozen in time. The image sent a jolt through Sarah, igniting a memory buried deep within. The love they once shared surged forth, and she felt the shadows recoil, fearful of the very essence they sought to destroy. "Together," she yelled, her voice raw with power. "We can do this together." Pushing the light forward, she felt warmth spill from her, feeding the gleam in front of her. The shadows writhed, their laughter twisted into agony, splintering as the light cut through once more. Tom was fading, slipping away under layers of malice, but she refused to accept that fate. "Where there is love," she whispered, a surge of courage washing over her, "there is light." In that moment of clarity, the walls trembled as if responding, the shadows contracting, wailing, desperate to reclaim their lost grip. "Surrender, surrender," they beckoned. But Sarah's heart thundered defiantly against the whispers. Every heartbeat screamed for her children. Her love ignited a fire that turned fear into fury, and before she knew it, she was stepping forward, light outstretched like a sword, ready to sever the darkness binding Tom. A sudden explosion of blinding brilliance enveloped them, cascading through the room, pushing back the shadows like sunlight parting storm clouds. Tom staggered back into the light, free from the binding grip, his face more vibrant than she had ever seen. "Yes, Sarah," he yelled, awe and admiration shining in his eyes. "You've got it." The shadows shrieked, battling against the relentless tide of love fueled by Sarah's light. But the room was not done. It cracked and groaned under the weight of their chaos. The ground split, revealing a chasm, a dark void that seemed to breathe. "Finish this. Don't hold back," Tom urged, reaching for her. But before she could respond, a great pulse erupted from the darkness, as if it had lungs of its own. The children's faces, horrified yet expectant, reflected the storm of emotions within her: love, fear, hope entangled in a struggle. Could she push through, face the abyss, and reclaim her family? In a split second, everything unraveled before her. "Together," Sarah cried again, uncertainty rippling through her. The shadows lurched, swirling closer, the whispers now frantic and high-pitched, gnashing at her ears. She had to know the fate of them all depended on one last choice. Would she leap into the heart of darkness? Would she brave the void? As the shadows slithered toward her, threatening to pull her into oblivion, a bone-chilling thought struck her. What if they were not just shadows? What if they were remnants of lost souls, twisted by despair and seeking salvation of their own? Would love be enough, or had they all ventured too far into the abyss? In that moment, the room trembled ferociously, shadows and light locked in an eternal struggle, and Sarah was left wondering, how far would she go to save her family? The ground continued to quake beneath her feet, a violent pulse that echoed the frantic thudding of Sarah's heart. She locked eyes with Tom, his features twisted in anguish, mirroring the confusion swirling inside her. The shadows coiled tighter, their whispers now a frenzied chant that reverberated around them, a sound like nails on a chalkboard that crawled under her skin. "Sarah," Tom shouted, his voice cut through the din. "Don't think, act." The command struck her with brutal clarity. But how could she choose action when the abyss yawned before her, promising chaos and despair? Tears pooled in her eyes, mixing with the heat of determination. Together her voice wavered, but it was a lifeline. They needed to unite against this terror. The room felt alive, the shadows clawing at her soul while the flickering light around her seemed to hum with an ancient energy. It was a moment suspended in time, both intoxicating and horrifying. Would she embrace the darkness or let the light guide her family to safety? With a roar of courage, she lunged forward, the beam of light extending like an anchor into the void. The shadows screamed a sound that made her bones vibrate. "You cannot escape your fate," they shrieked, their voices blending into a haunting symphony, a chorus of pain and possession. But Sarah gripped Tom's hand tightly, drawing power from their bond. "Hold on," she cried, the invocation of love igniting a brilliance around them. The light swelled, illuminating not just the shadows but the truth. The walls pulsated with memories of laughter, joy, and warmth, the very essence of her family. It was a strength greater than any malevolent force. "I won't let go," she bellowed, her voice mingling with the light as it radiated into the darkness, transforming anguish into power. The shadows recoiled, retreating as if the warmth was searing them. Yet, the chasm beckoned, revealing depths that shimmered like a million tortured souls. Sarah's heart raced. She felt lost souls beckoning her, ghostly hands reaching out. "We're trapped. Help us," their cries echoed like sirens, sweet yet laced with malice. Instinct screamed at her to retreat, to abandon the pull of the void. But in the throes of terror, an idea flared, a desperate gamble. "They want freedom," she thought, her breath shaky. Maybe I can help them." "Sarah, no." Thomas' warning cut through her thoughts. But she was already moving, trapped between resolve and fear. She would not let another moment of despair consume anyone, soul or blood. "Let my family go," she demanded, her voice firm yet trembling. "You want to be free? Then I'll set you free." The shadows halted, their writhing bodies hesitating, as if intrigued by her audacity. She closed her eyes, focusing on every love-filled memory she had. The warmth of family dinners, the laughter of joyful summers, the comforting touch of her mother's hand. As she forged this connection, a pulse of light burst forth, brighter than before, engulfing both shadows and the crying souls. "The light is stronger than the dark," she screamed, her words resonating in the air, echoing against the wall of despair. Tom's grip tightened on her wrist. What if they don't listen? Fear filled his voice, a trace of doubt seeping through their bond. Sarah looked at him, knowing he held the burden of uncertainty. "Then I'll drag them into the light myself," she whispered, stepping into the chasm, the light engulfing them. A deafening roar erupted. Shadows twisted and fought back against the blinding brilliance. The cries of souls intensified, a symphony of longing drowning out her own heartbeat. She felt herself being pulled apart, torn between love and desperation. Would the light save them, or would they all be swallowed into a darkness they couldn't escape? As her breath caught in her throat, a haunting question echoed in her mind. In the battle of light and darkness, would she become the savior or yet another lost soul? Light pulsed around Sarah, a wild dance of energy stirring the shadows into a frenzied chaos. She felt Tom's presence next to her, his fear fueling her resolve despite his whispered misgivings. "We can't stop now," she shouted over the rising storm of tortured cries. "We're so close." But as the brilliance intensified, something shifted. The chandelier overhead shattered with a sound like thunder, shards raining down in a cascade of glittering danger. The shadows snapped back like predators, eyes glinting with malevolence as they sensed the weakening of her focus, the vulnerability in her heart. The cries of the souls morphed into a cacophony of terror. "You'll regret this," they keened, their voices now sharp, echoing off the walls as if taunting her. "I won't let you down," she breathed, straining to channel every iota of light she could muster. "Not anymore." Time slipped. Seconds felt like hours. Just as she was starting to feel the power slip from her grasp, she remembered her mother's gentle encouragement, her father's warm embrace. The flickering light erupted, momentarily blinding her. Shadows retreated, recoiling in like a tide drawing back from an unseen shore. "Keep pushing," Tom urged, his voice tinged with desperation. But in the fleeting moment of triumph, a dark figure emerged the source of the shadows, a silhouette wreathed in despair, with hollow eyes that swallowed the light whole. "Foolish child," it hissed, a voice like grinding stone, wet with malice. "You think you can save them? You cannot even save yourself." Chilled to the bone, Sarah faltered. Was it truly hopeless? The darkness dripped like tar, swallowing her light, smothering her thoughts with heaviness. "No," she screamed against it, clenching Thomas' hand tighter. "I want to surrender." Forcing herself toward the depths of memory again, she recalled the warmth of laughter, the scent of cinnamon from the kitchen, her mother bending down to fix her hair before school. They were her strength. The shadows wavered but did not disappear, the doppelganger of her worst fears looming over her. "Join us," it crooned, injecting honey into a poisoned cup. "This world cannot understand you. You belong here with us, eternally." The offer slithered like a serpent, whispering doubts into the cracks of her will. Cold fear pricked at the edges of her mind, but Sarah stood firm, breathing in deeply. "I know love. I know family." The shadows roared, a monstrous cacophony of wrath crashing around them. For a blinding instant, the darkness twisted and mingled with her heart's memories, creating a tempest of blinding light and unrelenting despair. Feeling the weight of lost souls clawing at her spirit, a thought anchored her. "I'm not doing this alone." The realization swept over her, fortifying her resolve. Then it hit her: if she couldn't save them, she needed to set them free. "You want out? You want to leave this place of misery? Then face the light." She pushed her hands forward, channeling everything grief, hope, love into that radiant burst. The shadows shrieked, their bodies writhing, disintegrating like smoke in the wind. But suddenly, from the void, she sensed a shift and felt Tom jerk beside her. His eyes widened, terror-stricken. "Sarah, look out." Her pulse quickened as she turned just in time to see a wave of shadow surge forward, a tidal force threatening to swallow her whole. "Tom." The moment stretched, each heartbeat thunderous. Would she be consumed by the darkness she sought to fight? As it loomed ever closer, she locked her eyes onto his. "Step back!" he cried, desperation etched across his face. But would they both find the light, or would they both sink into the darkness? The shadows surged, a fearsome wave crashing down, threatening to engulf everything Sarah held dear. Yet in that harrowing moment, something inside her ignited a resolve forged in love, unyielding and pure. "Not today," she shouted, inhaling deeply, channeling the warmth of her children's laughter into the light that radiated from her core. The glow intensified, spilling across the room like liquid gold, dispelling the dark tendrils that wrapped around them. "Let go," she urged Tom, her eyes pleading. For a fleeting second, fear flickered across his face, but determination shone through as he released his hold. Sarah focused, the light growing brighter. The shadows hissed, retreating momentarily, torn between the alluring dark and the fierce love emanating from her. "Together," Tom shouted, the strength in her brother's voice amplifying her own light as he joined hands with her once more. Suddenly, the air thickened with a vibrant energy. They weren't fighting alone. Legacies echoed through their spirits, the strength of their family intertwined, weaving around them like a protective armor. Encompassed in the swirling glow, Sarah and Tom pushed forward, charging at the encroaching darkness. Shadows shrieked, their haunting whispers morphing into a symphony of anguish, chaotic and savage. "You'll pay." The dark figure roared, its voice laced with venom, refusing to relinquish its hold. "No," Sarah countered fiercely, eyes locked onto her brother's. "We will reclaim what is ours." The words burst forth with a conviction that resonated deep within her. With a loud exhale, they drove the light forward, pushing back against the shadows as they coiled and shrieked, desperately attempting to regain control. The dark figure faltered, recoiling from the radiant glow threatening to shatter its dominion. "Bring us back," a voice screamed from the void, echoing the cries of the trapped souls swirling in anguish. "You can't. You will not win." But Sarah's heart throbbed with more than fear. It pulsed with love, the kind that connects souls, transcending pain and despair. "We're here for you," she shouted, with every ounce of hope and strength behind her words. The light surged stronger, fueled by the innocence of her children's laughter ringing in her ears, banishing the shadows inch by inch. The dark figure roared, its form shifting wildly, colors swirling as the entities clawed at resisting the light. But the warmth grew, lancing through the dark like a sun breaking through storm clouds. Together, Sarah shouted once more, her voice cracking with raw emotion, weaving through loss and triumph alike. Together, Tom echoed resolutely, the light flaring as they pressed closer. The whispers became frantic, fearful. The faces of warped souls morphed from malice to sorrow as the shadows began to unravel, tendrils snapping like brittle twigs underfoot. "Stay away," the dark entity screeched, but it was too late. They drew on the shared legacy, the familial love they had long fought to reclaim. In that piercing moment, as the light bridged the gap between shadows and hope, Sarah felt a warmth envelop her, a protective embrace of recognition and healing. In a final surge, Sarah and Tom thrust the light forward, culminating in an explosion of brilliance that blasted through the fear, the pain, the shadows. The dark figure howled, a shriek of loss that faded into nothingness, leaving behind only a whisper of what was once a fading memory. Silence enveloped the room. The shadows dispersed into mist, swirling away like smoke on a gentle breeze. Every inch of fear, every ounce of doubt began to dissolve, replaced with a profound stillness that felt almost sacred. "Mommy?" Emma's voice trembled as she appeared at the doorway, Jake's little hand gripping hers, their faces pale but shining with cautious hope. Relief poured through Sarah as joy swelled in her heart. She crouched down, arms wide open, welcoming her children into the embrace she thought she might never have again. "Mommy!" they cried, launching into her warmth, and in that moment, time held its breath. Tom's hand rested softly on Sarah's shoulder. A silent connection forged anew between them. Lingering fear faded, leaving a radiant warmth, love triumphing over despair. For the first time since they arrived, the air felt clear, light spiraling around them, banishing the remnants of the curse that held the motel captive. They had fought the shadows of despair together, reclaiming not just their children but a bond that had long been fractured. "Are we safe?" Jake asked, peering around as if waiting for the shadows to return. Sarah looked down at him, adoration evident in her eyes. "We are, darling. Together we are safe." And as the soft glow of dawn began to creep through the motel windows, casting warmth over the remnants of the night's horrors, Sarah knew that they were free. Free to forge ahead, lighter than before. The motel, once a cage of nightmares, now stood as testament to love's undeniable power, a place transformed. With hope stirring within her, Sarah smiled at her children and her brother, knowing they would steer clear of shadows beyond that door, armed with the unbreakable bond they rediscovered. The past may haunt them, but in love's embrace, they found the courage to move forward. So as the sun broke the horizon, illuminating the redemption of room 403, Sarah took her family's hand, ready to step into a new chapter, one where light forever triumphed over darkness. If this story gripped you, if it made your heart race and pulled at your very soul, you need to subscribe now. Don't wait even one more second. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. And don't forget to instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support means the world, and true fans know the importance of standing together.